Ultra Kaiju Monster Rancher is the newest Monster Rancher game. It has colorful graphics, pleasant music, great looking kaiju, fun battles. Overall, I thought it was good. It says so right in the thumbnail of my review for it. But in the review, I also said it's flawed. Progress is slow, ranching is repetitive, combining is cryptic and dumb. That was my opinion, of course, and most people seem to agree with me. But there are fans out there that don't take too kindly to opinions that are not their own. Their conclusion was the difficulty I experienced in figuring the game out was because I sucked at it. To that I say, opinions are free and I'm not one to say something about my skill, especially when the bar is set so low. But there was more to their sick burn, and it got me really thinking. See, all of them also suggested I instead play a different game meant for babies and has no depth and isn't hardcore. They told me to play Pokemon, and I wonder why. Why is it that Monster Rancher is considered niche and Pokemon has a more casual veneer? And most importantly, are they right? Is Pokemon simple and shallow? How much simpler is it compared to Monster Rancher? Welcome one and all to Vivi's Doodled World. I play games and occasionally doodle. I've also played Monster Rancher and Pokemon extensively and will now make a lengthy breakdown of their gameplay and mechanical differences instead of telling you outright what I think is the better game. Not an easy task, I must admit. Although both games have a similar premise, get monsters, raise them up, take them to battles, and be the best of the best. But as we go on, you'll realize that they are wildly different. I'm gonna compare them in several categories, namely how you get your monsters, how you raise them, the battle system, the overall gameplay loop, post-game content, and its multiplayer and competitive side. So let's start with monster acquisition. Already, this isn't looking good for Monster Rancher. At the very beginning of any Pokemon game, you're made to choose from 3 starters. They come in the form of either a fire, water, or grass-type Pokemon. From there though, you have to explore the open world and dive into tall grass, caves, and bodies of water to find new pets. Discovering new Pokemon occurs naturally as you progress through the game, and there are a ton of Pokemon to choose from. Specific Pokemon are found in specific places. For example, Zigzagoon is easily found in tall grass outdoors, while Zubats are found in caves. They also vary in rarity. You might know that Pikachus can be found in Viridian Forest, but it might take you a while to actually find one. And there's also one-off Pokemon, or what we call the legendaries. They are usually in very specific spots in the game, like Rayquaza sitting atop the Sky Pillar. And once you catch them, that's it. You won't see another one again in the same save file. Overall, it's a great way to reward the player for exploring their surroundings, and actually makes looking for specific Pokemon engaging. In Monster Rancher, however, getting monsters is a lot simpler. The games throughout the series have different methods, but they all boil down to one thing. You, as the player, are prompted to enter something. These could be random words, drawings, CDs that you swap in and out of your PlayStation, and what monster you get is determined by what you put in. But of course, you won't know what'll come out unless you try. Now, does that sound familiar to anybody? Does it not sound like, say, putting in a coin and getting a capsule with an unknown reward? That's right, Monster Rancher's generation is a gacha mechanic. Now I have to admit, the idea of inserting random music CDs to see what comes out of it was quite novel back in the PS1 days. But by now I feel it's run its course. You have to realize that this introduces randomness to Monster Generation. What this means is you might, and probably will, through no fault of your own, fail to get an arrowhead many times before you finally get one. Pokemon easily has the better system here. Now let's discuss raising methods, which is how you build and develop your pets. And the ranch bit in Monster Rancher is there for a reason. The ranch is primarily there to strengthen your monster. Heck, you can even go to the ranch without a monster. Time in the ranch is segmented into weeks. There's 4 weeks per month and 12 months per year. It's actually turn-based in a way. Each week you can do some training to raise your monster's stats, but you can also let them rest. Fatigue and stress builds up over time. If you don't mitigate these, it'll affect your pet's performance in the long run. Along with requiring being fed every month, you can also give items to your monsters. Depending on your ranching style, your monster can get fat or thin, become spoiled, get stressed out. There's a lot to keep track of. Even learning new attacks takes place in the ranch, which come in the form of 1-month-long training sessions. The racing method in Pokemon, however, is inextricably tied to another system. It's battles. Because to get stronger, Pokemon needs experience points. This knowledge alone is enough to carry you through any Pokemon game. But that's only the surface. What if I told you that winning battles and gaining experience does more to change your Pokemon than you think? Enter the effort system, an under-the-hood mechanic that influences the stats of your Pokemon. Along with the XP, Pokemon gain effort points when they fight. Get enough and your stats go up. Which stat goes up depends on the foe. For example, beating a lot of Zubats will raise your speed, while beating Machops will raise your physical attack. The good thing about the effort system is that it makes your Pokemon stronger even if you don't know about it. This is why in-game NPCs say Pokemon raised by trainers are stronger than wild ones. Any Pokemon you catch will always start with no effort points. Targeted and focused effort training is really for competitive and endgame content, which we'll get to later. So even though Pokemon seems simple, there's still some hidden depth. Monster Rancher's intricacies, however, are more easily observed. Still, the under-the-hood mechanics of both games are cryptic. I never knew of the effort system until I looked up a guide. But for now, when it comes to the complexity of raising methods, Monster Rancher's system is by far better. We, however, can't declare which game has more depth yet. We also have to look into the battle system. I'll break this down into parts as well. First is the flow. Monster Rancher has real-time battles. Each fight has a 60-second time limit. When the time is up, the monster with more health percentage remaining wins. The monsters can move back and forth in the arena, and the attacks they can use depend on how far they are from the enemy. The Gut system restricts how often monsters can attack. Guts builds up as time passes, and all attacks require a certain amount of Guts. Pokemon, on the other hand, has turn-based battles. All participants choose a move to execute for that turn, and then the Pokemon does it. Fights don't end until one team is completely wiped out. And that's the basic flow. Now let's take a look at the variables. Both games have 6 primary stats in total, and both have physical or power and special or intelligence split. While Pokemon has dedicated stats for physical and special defense, Monster Rancher has one defense stat, and the attack stats add some defense to that type. They also share speed, however it works differently in both games. In Pokemon, speed determines which Pokemon moves first, and that's pretty much it. Being able to move first is often a tipping point. If your Pokemon gets knocked out before it moves, you've essentially lost a turn. In Monster Rancher, speed determines your dodge rate. Attacks in Monster Rancher tend to miss. I'd say the average accuracy is around 40 to 50%. It directly interacts with the skill stat, which increases your hit rate. So let's discuss this. Monster Rancher gives players a lot more freedom with building their pets. They're free to completely ignore intelligence and focus up on power. But skill is one stat that you cannot ignore. Inevitably, you'll run into an opponent with high speed, and if the gap between your skill and their speed is enough, attacks can have as little as 10% chance of hitting. It even goes down to 1%, and when this happens, all I can say is, good luck. Conversely, however, you can ignore speed because you can fall back to defense and HP to tank hits. Pokemon attacks can also miss, but they're tied to individual moves. Flygon's Fire Blast here has 85% accuracy, which is considered quite low already, but really those are in the minority. Most moves in Pokemon have a 100% hit rate. Evasion and accuracy are also stats that can be boosted in battle by moves like Double Team, but these aren't affected by how you raise your Pokemon. Okay, what's next? Monster Rancher has battle specials that activate under certain conditions. They give temporary buffs like Power Boost, faster Guts regeneration, or even surviving a fatal blow with 1 HP remaining. In Kaiju Rancher, this is more streamlined. You can pick which specials you want to some extent, and they also always activate when the conditions are met. Kaiju Rancher also added status effects like Burn and Poison. They're legit strategic choices. You can also make your monster tankier or dodgier depending on their weight. And in Kaiju Rancher, there are perks and disadvantages to having a kaiju with high anger. And that's it. For Pokemon, we have the Pokemon types that determine weakness and resistance, status effects that often cripple Pokemon, held items that can power up your attacks, restore health, or cure status ailments, support strategies like weather conditions, entry hazards, stat boosting moves, and so much more. I can't even list them all. The turn-based system combined with Pokemon types does a lot for the depth of battles. There are a total of 18 types, and Pokemon can have up to 2. Each species can also learn just a fraction of the attacks in the game, and they're also limited to 4 moves at a time. Every fight is effectively a knowledge check. Have you encountered this Pokemon before, and if so, do you remember what type it is? Because if you guess wrong, they might survive your attack. Flygon is weak to ice, but hold that ice Pokemon, it can learn Fire Blast. Monster Rancher did try introducing elemental factors in some games, like the Monster Rancher Advance games, but it feels moot in practice, mainly because Monster Rancher is one-on-one. Pokemon, however, allows teams of up to 6 members, so in Monster Rancher, there is no way to cover your bases if there ever were elemental weaknesses. The series is better off without it. But even with 6 Pokemon, it is nigh impossible to cover all bases. Not only do you have to think about the attacks your Pokemon can use, you also have to consider what types your team members are weak to. Despite this though, Pokemon games are easier to beat than Monster Rancher. But that's mainly because Pokemon games are very accessible. Not only are the basics easy to understand, they're powerful enough to support you through the journey. Plus, there's a mechanic for fallback. Pokemon trainers can use items as many times as they want in single player, while 99% of NPC foes will never use any. It's both a tactical advantage and a way to brute force difficult fights. I could go on and on about the depths of Pokemon's battle system, but we have to move on as there's already a clear winner. Unfortunately, Pokemon's superiority will only reveal itself more once we talk about the competitive scene. Next, let's talk about the gameplay loop. This decides which game is more fun overall. A solid gameplay loop will keep you hooked until the end, hopefully with minimal dips in engagement along the way. Pokemon is a story-driven RPG that'll have you exploring the region, meeting new Pokemon, and fighting under trainers to gain experience and get stronger. The goal is usually to get to a town, find a new unexplored route, and you'll find more new trainers and new Pokemon. You keep going until you reach another town. There is a lot of discovery involved all throughout. In Monster Rancher, the gameplay loop is this. Ranch up your monster, then take them to battles to earn money. Regardless of what the purpose of your monster is, entering tournaments is necessary. It's the most effective way to earn money, the only upkeep for your ranch. It is a simple loop, but the complexity of ranching helps to keep you engaged. Yet there's a major snag. Monsters have stages in their life where they grow faster. Ideally, this is when you focus on training. It feels really good to see your monster grow in strength really quickly. Unfortunately, this is really short. After that, their growth will slow down, right up to the point where they reach the end of their life. Be it actual death in classic Monster Rancher, or forced retirement in newer games, this means your ranch time with your pet is donezo. No more training, no more ranch time, no more tournaments. I need to highlight this because the only way you're parted from your Pokemon will be because of you. That is, if you decide to release them back in the wild or trading them away. You are never forced to surrender a beloved, hard-raised Pokemon you may have spent hours on. I want to illustrate what this is like. I've drawn this engagement curve for Pokemon games. It's highest at the start and slowly fades, but that's to be expected in all games. This, however, is my curve for Monster Rancher. See those dips? Those happen when your monster is taken from you. I theorize that there's a chance players will give up on the game after a dip. And even if they do persevere, the loop gets a little bit worse. And I'm not immune to this. I like ranching and all, but I won't deny that it gets very repetitive. There are only so many training variations in each Monster Rancher game, and you'll be doing them over and over and over and over. At least Pokemon keeps you on your toes by constantly introducing new puzzles and challenges, be it in the form of unexplored areas or never before seen Pokemon. I do, however, understand that the ranching bit is core to Monster Rancher, and that's fine, stick with the format. But this curve needs to improve. As for how to avoid these tips, how to not make monster retirements feel like crap, I don't know. But yeah, as much as I like ranching, Pokemon is a winner here yet again. Now let's talk post-game content. What is there to do after you reach the goal the game has set for you? What is beyond the end credits? As I'm writing this, I realize Monster Rancher has almost nothing. There are super bosses you can try to beat, like the Ultraman in Kaiju Rancher, and I guess you can also try to unlock every breed. Beyond that though, you're just ranching again. To what end? I guess to make your monster stronger than the previous. It's almost sad and pathetic when compared with Pokemon. You can, of course, try to catch them all, an ordeal that will undoubtedly take many more hours. It also gets more and more difficult as more mainline games come out. I mean, Jesus, I think there's over 1,000 Pokemon now. I played Pokemon Emerald for this video, a 3rd generation game. It has just under 400 Pokemon, but even here, I'll probably never fill the Pokédex. Beyond that, Pokemon also has battle facilities unlocked after beating the game. It's kind of like a procedurally generated challenge where you can participate in Pokemon battles to your heart's content. And trust me, your battle prowess and knowledge of the game will be put to the test here. It's also here that you'll greatly benefit from utilizing the effort system when training your Pokemon. In fact, your AI opponents here are effort trained, so you will need to do the same to win consistently. It's tough as nails and casuals won't get very far. So yeah, in terms of post-game content, Pokemon has it better again. And finally, let's discuss the multiplayer and competitive side. And for this to make sense, I have to talk about the limitations of Monster Rancher with regards to your monster's stats. Or rather, its lack of limitations. You can completely ignore one stat and max out another. But if you're good enough, you can max out both. Or hell, max out all the stats. This is great for single player. You can express yourself in the build of your monster, which is what I do in my exhibition videos. Maxing out all stats is also the pinnacle of ranching knowledge of sorts. But it is not good for multiplayer. Because for the sake of winning, if players can help it, they will of course enter a monster with stats as high as possible. And if all players do this, you eliminate variety. Thus, players have made their own rules to keep things interesting by introducing stat total limits. But that means you have to purposely limit yourself to even qualify. Think of it like saying to a professional boxer, you can't train your punches too much because rules. But that's not really a problem if you're so willing. That's what we do as a community after all. Nah, it pales in comparison to another limitation with the Monster Rancher games. There is no online play. Instead, you submit monsters to a database. That's it. You can't connect to other players for real-time battles. Because of this, every quote-unquote online tournament all have the AI control its monsters for its participants. It makes each and every round based on luck because the AI has no situational awareness. And yeah, I feel I don't have to defend my point any further. How stupid is it to leave control of the monster to the AI? Koei Tecmo's got no room to argue here. Fighting games have figured out how to conduct real-time online multiplayer, and that genre requires faster reaction times. And that's not the end of it too. The stats you upload to the servers are incomplete. I mentioned how the anger gauge has effects during battle depending on how high it is. Specifically, angry monsters start with more guts, but they also get confused more often. Well, when you upload your monster, the anger gauge isn't factored in. I don't know why, and it sucks. Pokemon, on the other hand, has had online versus since the Nintendo DS games. Sure, 6-on-6 fights took forever and are exhausting, especially if your opponent plays defensively, but at least the option's there. The use of items is banned, of course. Each Pokemon also has clear limitations. For example, a Slowbro will never outspeed a Jolteon, so players have less superficial limitations to work with. We've already talked about how deep Pokemon battles can be, and with the number of unique Pokemon already out there, you realize that's a lot of knowledge to absorb. For this reason, Pokemon is a nightmare to balance. Likewise, to solve this, communities also have rules, the most common being a tier system based on how powerful the Pokemon is. It might be sad to realize that your favorite Pokemon will never be the strongest, but that's how it is. You just have to embrace your Pokemon's strengths and weaknesses. There are also rules aimed at mitigating powerful strategies. The evasion clause, for example, bans all use of evasion raising moves, under the reasoning that it tips fights into luck-based territory. Combine all those and you have a seriously deep competitive aspect. It's actually really daunting. If you want to get into it, be prepared for a steep journey. With all that said, time for the conclusion. I didn't go fully in depth into either series. I didn't discuss Monster Rancher's combining system, and I didn't mention individual values and breeding in Pokemon. But that's because I feel like I don't have to. It's clear to me that Pokemon is way deeper than Monster Rancher. It just doesn't look like it. But in creating this video, I also realize comparing Monster Rancher and Pokemon doesn't really make sense because they're very different games. In fact, I'd say they're opposites in many aspects. The majority of the depth in Pokemon is in battle, while in Monster Rancher, it's in racing methods and monster combining, aka everything other than battles. The games are not similar but different, they're just different. Even so, I like them both, and even though my channel has a lot more Monster Rancher content and no Pokemon at all, I'm of the opinion that in both casual and hardcore play, Pokemon is the better series. Which is why I want Monster Rancher to improve, and that won't happen if we don't criticize its shortcomings. Right now, Pokemon is one of the highest grossing media franchises in the world. It even has Star Wars beat. Monster Rancher doesn't even register, and it's a darn shame. And that's all. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, show your support and all that. I hope you have a lovely day. See you next video.